Hello and welcome to this week's myNewsWrap, news from the world of SAP, Microsoft and the world in between. Let's start with the SAP world, and there are quite some news out there around Kyma this week. So let's take a look. First thing, the open source contributions of Kyma has a new release. It's Kyma 2.1. As I said, it's open source, so it's not yet the managed offering on SAP Business Technology Platform. And I have referenced the release notes of this open source release in the show notes. So, of course, this will also be rolled out onto the productive clusters in very soon. So if you want to take a look, what's happening, what's coming up, then take a look at these release notes, especially at the migration guide, because there are some changes. It's a bit of a cleanup release. So take a look at what's in there. Then, talking about Kyma, there is also a quite cool blog post by Gunther Albrecht, where he describes how to deploy the SAP Cloud Connector onto SAP Kyma and use it from there. So that's really cool scenario from my perspective, especially, for example, when you're doing demos, that could help a lot. And this blog post guides you through on what to do, on how to create the container image, and then how to deploy things to Kyma, especially with respect to persistent volume claims. And there is also one section about the DNS entry that you need to add to your service in order to make things accessible. So that's really a valuable blog post, definitely worth taking a look. And then we have a little podcast on the Open SAP podcasts area in the Stream SAP Integration and Extension Talks by Arthur Perry. And he's talking about building and running containerized business apps on Kubernetes, so basically on the SAP BTP Kyma runtime. And he gives an overview on why you should do that, what are the benefits when you do that, especially for your business app. So definitely worth chiming in. 28 minutes, so not too long, so not too time consuming, but absolutely definitely valuable to listen to. Now, with that, let's switch to the other side of the house, to Microsoft. And there I have some news from the serverless side, of course. First of all, little GA information around Azure Functions. Now we have a GA support for Node.js 16, which is the latest long-term support. As you know, Azure Functions usually are quite catching up with supporting always the last two LTS releases of Node. And now it's Node.js 16 that is officially supported. For that, you also have to use, of course, then the latest version of the Azure Functions runtime, which is v4, which you should anyway do. That's cool. And then another interesting issue that was opened that was opened quite some time ago, and I think there is now some good news around that. And that was opened by Anthony around support of the new durable function backends within the Visual Studio Code extension, which means that Netherite as well as the MS SQL backend that are both new and that complement the existing offering should be supported within the VS Code tooling. And I think this week the feature request was promoted to have a sufficient number of community upvotes, and it's now in the backlog. That basically also means that I think all those stuff will be coming GA in a time frame that is not too far away, I would hope. So that's cool. And then now, as every week, another video by Schrader Gray from the serverless world. This time not Azure Functions specific, but I think also valuable to watch when you are working in the serverless area. Namely, it's an interview with Gareth Metkamsky, talking about the serverless framework and how you can use it, what what challenges does it tackle? So of course, that's, I think, an interesting one. And then a last contribution from the serverless world by Stacey Cashmore. She recorded a little podcast on .NET Rocks about Azure Static Web Apps. What are Azure Static Web Apps, and why would you probably want to use those Azure Static Web Apps? Again, if you have not yet heard about Azure Static Web Apps, I think that's definitely, again, a good point to start with. And then moving over to the world of containers, there is a nice overview blog post by Mike Levan about Azure Container Apps and how they are stacked, what moving parts are in the Azure Container Apps. I think super cool overview blog post about the different components and a bit about Q&As. What are the typical questions and answers that come along when you see those components, when you see the offering, the Azure Container Apps. So that's really cool. And by the author, I also stumbled across a very nice tweet thread that I've referenced within the show notes about learning Kubernetes. Clearly stating, and that's from my perspective really super important, that Kubernetes and learning Kubernetes is not just about learning Kubernetes per se. You have to take a quite broad look, a quite broad understanding in different areas in order to be capable of working with Kubernetes. And that's super valuable from my perspective. Now, with that, if you're using the Azure service of Kubernetes, namely AKS, there is a little homepage that I would like to, or a landing page that I would like to bring to your attention by Azure MVP Pascal Naber, who brought that up. That shows you the latest version that is available of AKS in the different regions. So at the moment, we are completely in sync as far as I saw with 122.6, but that is not necessarily the case. So if there are updates rolling out, regions are not all updated at the same point in time. So then this is really super helpful. And there is also a Twitter bot that is referenced on the page that you can that you can use for that in order to get notified about new AKS versions. Having said that, I also referenced within the show notes the AKS roadmap, because it's also something that you might be probably interested in, and maybe you are not aware of that. That's completely publicly available on GitHub. So you have there the overview on the backlog, on what's planned and committed, what's currently in progress, what's in preview, what's GA, and what's already done. So which means that it's more than 1 month in GA state. So that's, I think, also super helpful. Then I also would like to draw your attention to a new Twitter community that was opened up by Thomas Maurer around Azure Hybrid. If you are working with, for example, Azure Arc, I think that's definitely a valuable community to be in there, because there are all the usual suspects in there in that area. Now, with that, let's switch to the area of DevOps. First of all, a little learning series around Bicep and how to bring or to deploy your Azure infrastructure as code. This series started already on March the 8th and is moving on until May the 10th with 10 episodes around Bicep. So there are already some available as a recording. There's always a learning module attached to that one that you can do in order to get your hands dirty with Bicep, really starting from the beginning and then going more and more into details, into more advanced topics. If you are starting with Bicep, or if you want to learn more about Bicep, then I think that's definitely a very good place to start. And then some blog posts from GitHub from the security area. I think a really valuable blog post about how to secure your end-to-end supply chain on GitHub, splitting things up into securing your account and additional information on that, securing your code in your supply chain, again, with more information in referenced within the section, and how to secure your build system. So hardening your security for GitHub Action, for example. Yeah, super important if you are using that. If you're using GitHub for your software supply chain, so that's definitely worth reading. And then another blog post from the README project that is also brought forward by GitHub about root cause analysis and what is the content of root cause, what it's addressing, and who are the recipients of such a root cause analysis. So the blog post is titled "What We Talk About When We Talk About Root Cause." So that's really interesting read on that topic, because there are, I think, some different expectations around that topic, and that is really helpful, this blog post. Then an announcement around features that came up with GitHub. There is now a small feature, but I think super helpful. You have now tooltips for label descriptions. So usually the labels are quite short and maybe leave some room for interpretation. So you can now do a label description, and that's available in the tooltip. Quite nice feature addition. And then a bit of a bigger addition that was announced this week. GitHub Copilot is now available for Visual Studio with edition 2022. So up to now, I think GitHub Copilot was available for VS Code, of course, for IntelliJ, and I think for another one. I'm not quite sure about the third one. And now you can also use it within Visual Studio. So that's, I think, really, really cool. Now let's move on to the broader Microsoft ecosystem. And there is one announcement that came out this week that Microsoft acquired Minute. So Microsoft made an acquisition in the area of, let's say, process insights, process mining. So all the things that Celonis, for example, is doing, all the things that the acquisition of Signavio by SAP is also targeting. And it's interesting to see that also Microsoft is investing in that area. And I've referenced the announcement blog post that is available from Minute on that topic. And then another interesting video that was that came out this week by Jonah Anderson on a service that I think is maybe a bit overlooked, but super valuable. It's the Azure Web PubSub service that allows you to have a fully managed service for real-time messaging within web applications via WebSockets and using PubSub. So that's really, really cool and nice overview in crisp 23 minutes on that service. So I think that's really cool. Now, let's switch with that to the world in between SAP and Microsoft. And first things first. Today, by coincidence, 2nd of April, Holger Bruchelt has his birthday. So happy birthday, Holger. Wish you all the best. Have a great day. And hope to see you soon in person again. Now, nevertheless, although it's Holger's birthday, there is a new edition of his podcast, SAP on Azure. And this week it's about demoing the SAP deployment automation framework. I think there was already a session in a prior edition, and I think there have been now some updates, new releases that came out and new features that came out that make perfect sense to show that, or to show the updates and what's the thing capable of. There is this podcast that is talking about the topic, and in addition, there is also a dedicated video on the same channel about this deployment automation framework on Azure. So here you have 35 minutes just purely focusing on that one. And of course, with Holger's podcast, there is a lot more information there. And then one more thing from the area of SAP and Microsoft. I have referenced a LinkedIn post by Manuel Thalhofer from All for One that contains a small video about next-gen SAP services, that how they call it, where they make SAP S4 available as an Office 365 app. So that's kind of a very, very classical scenario to integrate, especially SAP core functionality, which is S4, into the Office or Microsoft 365 universe. And this video guides you through. I've referenced the LinkedIn blog post, the LinkedIn post, where the video is embedded. I did not find it on the homepage, on the landing page that's referenced, but maybe I just didn't look close enough. Just stick there to have this short video. The referenced link guides you to the overall landing page of the topic. Yeah, and with that, we are coming to the area of learning and upcoming events. First, learning, and there is a great video that was published this week or broadcasted this week during the InnoQ Technology launch by Michael Plöth on domain-driven design for digital product organizations. The video is in German, but it's a great source if you are thinking about all the influences of DDD on digital product organizations, all the valuable questions and insights that it can bring up there. So really, if you are working within a digital product organization, take a look at this 45 minutes video, because it's just worth it. Hopefully some from SAP are also watching this and are taking a look at this video, because I think that's really super valuable. Then, now as every week, another high quality contribution by Golo Roden about JavaScript. He gives a very crisp overview about the features that came along and evolved within JavaScript from ES 2016 to ES 2021, and also gives a short outlook on what's coming up in ES 2022, so what to expect there. Super valuable from my perspective, super crisp overview on the different topics that came out and that you might have missed at some point in time. Then from the certification side, I would to highlight one new certification that I think is really important by Microsoft. It's an expert certification on cybersecurity. It's Cybersecurity Architect Expert. I have referenced the certification overview page, which gives you the details on what are the prerequisites, what are the exams to take. This time it's only one. And then the certification that you have. The certification will become available at April the 7th. So it's currently in beta. And then there are some events coming up. First, the Azure Cosmos DB Conf is coming up at the end of April. I think I have announced that already some time ago, but now there is, the landing page is now up and running. You can register. It's a 3-hour live segments with short and crisp 25-minute sessions. There are different live streams for the different areas, for the different time zones. That's great. So you have an American, an Asia Pacific, and Europe, Middle East times stream. That's really cool. So you can definitely add that to your calendar for end of April. Then end of May, Microsoft Build is coming up. There is not too much information out there, just that the date is settled again, and it's May the 24th to May the 26th this year, where Microsoft Build is taking place. And I think it's, again, of course, virtually. So definitely cool to sign up there. And then, of course, in May, there is also an event of SAP that you might be well aware of. It's the SAP Sapphire, which is, from my understanding now, hybridish event. So it will be online, but it will also be partially on-site, and will not be on-site only on one location. It will make a little world tour, starting at Orlando, where it usually takes place in May the 10th to May the 12th, and then touring around the world and finishing its world tour in September in Munich. So let's see what that will bring. And with that, I'm coming to the last section for today, developer experience, and information around that topic. There are two blog posts that came out on GitHub that are really interesting for folks who are starting their journey in developing. So one is called Career Tips for Beginner Developers, which is an interview with Rizzle Scarlett, who is part of the developer relationships team at GitHub, talking about your journey, starting your journey. What are the best tips for you as a beginner developer? And kind of in the same area, there is another blog post about how GitHub does its technical interviews. That's really interesting on how they set it up and what's the mindset around that. And that's really cool. And I also like the subtitle that the technical interviews should be as similar and should have a very, very high similarity with the way you will later work at GitHub. So not any artificial questions from somewhere in the larger information technology theory. But, well, that doesn't help anybody if you are then doing something completely different, right? So I think also quite valuable blog post. Then a short video about, of course, the Windows Terminal and how to personalize that Windows Terminal in the Windows Wednesday video format. There have been quite some updates with Windows Terminal over the recent months, so definitely worth taking a look to catch up with all the new features and options that you have. And then I would like to finish with a tweet by Tom Karkove that he pushed out this week, and I think that perfectly resonates with me about open source. And he says that free and open source is a complete fairy tale. So this combination. So you have to support your projects either through donations, through engineering effort, or through any other way. If not, you will pay a price along the way when consuming this open source stuff. So definitely something from my perspective to print out this tweet and hang it everywhere into every enterprise that is just consuming open source, but not contributing to open source in any sense. That's definitely something that has to change, and I heavily loved this tweet. So that's really perfect, and that's how I want to wrap up this session. I hope, again, I had some news for you, some stuff to take a closer look at, to dig into. And with that, I wish you a nice Saturday, especially you, Holger. Have a nice birthday. A great Saturday, a great Sunday, and a successful next week. Until then, bye.